Hello, reporter room investigators. It's great to see you. Good evening. My name is Jessica Della Davies. Can you guys hear me okay? I see daylight disinfectant in the dentist chair, and you're still here for the live. Thank you. Energy Shots is here. Been waiting all day. Oh, I'm sorry that you have to miss part of it, but I'm glad you're here. Jane is here. Hey, it's great to see you guys. I could not get this up on Twitter. I tried, but Twitter's telling me I'm over my tweet limit, which is 400 a day. I think I've posted like 5 or 6 tweets today. So I don't know what's going on with Twitter today, but I'm really glad you guys are here. We're going to have a great day. Let me just start off by saying thank you to our executive producers, Energy Shots and Sasha Angel, our producers, Jan Brooks, Spirit Walker, Jane J, and then American Alpha. And thank you so much for your super thanks and super stickers to Freckles, Joanne. And also thank you to our channel members. So grateful for each and every one of you. This channel would not be the same without you. We're going to be talking about Bryan Kohberger today. I've got a package ready to go for you guys. It's going to be a great day. So grab some snacks, grab some coffee. I've got some water going here. I got a package ready to go. My computer's notifying me that we're live, so I'm assuming you guys are getting your notifications too. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And let's get started.
I was wandering around all of the hallways on multiple floors. Is on the bulletin boards, they had all of the teacher assistants, the TAs, and the professors listed in many different places, and his name didn't appear anywhere. I initially thought, okay, they went through after the arrest and they got his name off of everything in this building. But now I'm wondering, with this new information you're reporting, did they take his name down much earlier because he was in fact fired?
Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies starts now.
I think.
So if you haven't heard, Bryan Kohberger apparently got fired. Let me pull this up. This is crazy. So Ashley Banfield, that I'm going to play for you in just a second, learned that Bryan Kohberger was fired from his position as a teaching assistant or student teacher. I've heard it said both ways at Washington State University. So is this what led up to, or did this enrage him? Did this make him so angry? So Scott Bond, who's an author, he's an SK expert, he weighed in on what he thought might have led up to what happened to Bryan. He said that that quote, Bryan, quote, reached a tipping point where he couldn't take it anymore and he had to act out his fantasy. He said it's being reported that, okay, so I don't know, do you think that that's what happened? Was Bryan just acting out some crazy fantasy? Was this what pushed him over the edge? Did this enrage him? If you think that being fired helped propel this, what happened, and I'm not saying that anybody who fired him should be, in any trouble for firing him, but I think it's certainly interesting that and we have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the crazy lurking around that he was doing over at the Idaho State campus. And we're going to talk about being peeping toms and voyeurs, how to keep yourself safe. We're also going to be talking about the girl that's latched onto him on Facebook, because the guy who could never get a girlfriend is getting a girlfriend. Jane, thank you so much. I'm feeling better. I'm up and going today. For those of you that didn't know, I had a upper respiratory infection, was still continuing to edit and all that, and then it moved into the lower. So I am just back on my feet. Hi, Elaine. Linda's here. Daylight saying thank you to all the producers, all the members, all the supporters. Yes, and all the mods. Thank you so much. Kathy's here. Olwyn's here. May's here. Cockatoo Lady's here. I don't think I've seen you in before. Jane is here. Bonnie's here. Love, Agape Love is here. Barb Warren. Hi, Barb. I tried to post it onto Twitter, but it said that I was over my tweet limit, and you're supposed to be able to tweet, I think, like 400. I don't think I've tweeted more than like maybe 6 or 7, maybe 8 posts all day. So I don't know what happened. But if any of you guys could put this up on Twitter, I would be so grateful. Jackie's here. I am looking into it now, Jackie. I'm working on a piece for this. I really thought they were going to find her, but anyway, and yeah, being fired as a teacher's assistant is not a good sign. So anyway, I think that I will be doing the NICHOL case. I thought for sure they were going to find her, but then they didn't. I think she is in the water. I really do, but I'm going to definitely dig into it more. I've been doing research all day on it, but I'm working right now. I'm editing one for you guys on this case for tomorrow. So there will be a new video tomorrow. And then the day after, if they haven't found NICHOL, I will be doing it. Thank you so much, Bonnie. I really appreciate it. So if you wouldn't mind giving this a thumbs up, it does really help me with the YouTube algorithm. If there's any way you could consider getting this out on Twitter, I would appreciate your help, since I'm being told that I'm over my tweet limit today. I don't know what's going on. And I'm verified on that platform, so it's really weird. But I couldn't even ask support for help, because when I tried to tweet them, it said I was over my limit. So I don't know. But let's get back to why we're all here, which is the Bryan Kohberger case. So for those of you just joining us, Bryan Kohberger was apparently fired from his position as a teaching assistant at the Washington State University. It's absolutely crazy to think that nobody has said anything until now about this. So we're going to listen. Ashley Banfield and Brian Enton both weighed in on this. I saw somebody say they don't like Ashley Banfield. That's fine. The information is the information. So she's the one that broke the story. So I like her. I think she's good. But anyway, I've got a package prepared for you guys. So let's get into it. Let's listen to Ashley Banfield for just a second.
Jessica Della Davies starts now.
I think it's important because in the Idaho murder case, there's been a lot of focus on the chief defendant in the case, Bryan Kohberger. And now we are learning a few things were happening in that man's life leading up to and right after the murders. Things like being investigated by his own school, Washington State University, where he was working as a teaching assistant. And apparently the investigation wasn't going well. He was warned time after time after time to cut back on the bad behavior. We're told behavioral problems specifically. But time after time after time, he didn't. He got more feisty and belligerent, even
You could just imagine how somebody like this, who feels, probably very enraged by this as a start, but also he would have also felt a loss of power, right? He would have felt like he wasn't as powerful. And we know a big part of being a peeping Tom or a stalker is getting that feeling of power over the people that you are watching. And when I say you, I don't mean you, but Bryan is innocent. He hasn't had his day in court, so everyone's innocent till proven guilty. And for those of you that don't know, everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion, and opinions are not facts. So please don't send any negativity to anyone. Let's be kind to each other. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So please subscribe, pull up a comfy chair, and give this video a thumbs up. So we know that Bryan was seen lurking. So he was fired from his teaching job at the Washington State, right? And then we know also that we've heard reported that at the Idaho State, he was lurking around at the student union. Now, the student union, for those of you that don't know, it's one of the few places you could go on campus where you do not have to show an ID. So I'm not saying he couldn't have found an ID or made an ID or something like that, but he wouldn't have needed one to get in and out of there. And apparently he was lurking around, as reported by two students, that got creeper vibes from him. They felt uncomfortable. They felt like he was staring at them. And so it makes me wonder if Maddie, Xana, or Kaylee were in there, or did he have his eye on someone else? Was he targeting someone else? He was lurking around the campus. Did he plan on targeting anyone else, or was he watching anyone else? And we know from looking at the 1122 King Road house and the tour that I showed you a few weeks ago that Brian Enton did, that showed you the back way, we know that there's a parking lot that sits behind the 1122 King Road house, right? And that parking lot sits up. It sits up enough so that you can look into the second floor perfectly. You're almost looking down, and definitely into the third floor. They were living in a goldfish bowl, and it makes me wonder. Tell me what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think, and put up a 1 if you think this is true, and put up a 2 if you do not think this is true. Do you think it's possible that Brian was lurking around this 1122 King Road, that he was parking in this public parking lot that was for the apartment complex and watching through the window? Put up a 1 if you think that he was lurking around and watching prior to this happening from that parking lot, and put up a 2 if you think that he was not. And let's see where we're at with this. I'm seeing some 1s. And the dog, yes, that's Buddy. The dog is Buddy, Claudia. Yes, I know. That's just so, it makes you wonder about Buddy the dog now. They're saying it couldn't be related, but I don't know, guys. Who else would be lurking around, honestly, to do something like this? As you can see, I've got a lot of 1s, and I just want to show you guys all the 1s. So a lot of people are agreeing that he definitely could have been lurking around in that parking lot. And Diane says, unless he was a werewolf. Well, we know he wasn't a werewolf. Lisa says 1, and my last one is a 2. Brittany says 2. So yeah, poor sweet Buddy. I agree, Jane. It's like, so for those of you that don't know, there was a dog named Buddy, and one of the neighbors, this is like, I'm going to very, very carefully tell the story because I have to watch my words to be, keep this, a healthy conversation. But these people let their dog out, the neighbors of the 112 King Road house, and somebody got a hold of this dog and did something horrendous. You guys can look it up. I don't even want to say it on the air. It's just too horrifying. But it does make me wonder if he was let go from the student teaching position. And we know that these people who stalk and creep, they get a feeling of power over the people that they're stalking. And it does make me wonder now if there is some kind of a relation to Buddy, what happened to the dog, and Brian. How many times Brian was in that parking lot? We know that his cell phone pinged around 9 times leading up to what happened on November the 13th. So did he also do something to this dog? And yes, Vicky, I agree. He's becoming creepier and scarier by the day. It really is. But let me just tell you a little bit more about the pathology, because I did some research on this. So he could have been coming by and peeped in on Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana, and maybe the other 2 roommates too, but I'm going to name them because it seems like the target was on the 3rd floor. And I've heard some people say that he could have climbed up on the couch to get up onto the 3rd floor. He could have come in the 2nd floor sliding glass doors. And then I've also put forth the 3rd theory, which is that he could have used that ladder. They had a ladder standing outside the house that could have easily been propped up to climb up onto that 3rd floor balcony and then put back. But when you're picking out a house for yourself or for someone you love, just keep in mind that if you like do a search on people who have been found guilty, and these are just people who've been caught, you'll see that around your house, there's like a lot of creepers around there. And I'm watching my words here. So make sure that your house is set up so that you can close your blinds, that you can close your windows, and do that at night. Consider getting blinds that you could tilt up even during the day so that people can't just see right in. Because a peeping Tom or voyeur, as they're also called, can be for gratification, and I'm watching my words, but it can also be, and it may be done at the time or it could be done afterward, where they're just feeling that power over the victims. And this type of personality, they will feel very, very powerful on the person that they're peeping or creeping onto. So they can become dangerous. This can escalate. And if a peeping Tom becomes confident in his or her, because women do this too, to remain undetected, they may be able to escalate to physical contact or more invasive types of behaviors, like coming into your house, going through your drawers, looking at your intimate things, touching your clothing, smelling your pillowcase, just really, really creepy stuff. And I would imagine that getting fired from this job would have made him feel powerless, right? Getting the warnings, being told, and it makes me wonder why. We don't know why, but I would imagine that getting those warnings would make him feel powerless. So did this propel him forward and escalate his behavior in an effort to feel more powerful? Let's listen in to what Ashley Banfield said, because she broke the story. So credit to NewsNation and Ashley Banfield. And also, I think Brian Enton I have another package with him in it as well.
Arguing with his professors until they finally decided, you're fired. That's right. Bryan Kohberger was fired as a teaching assistant from Washington State University. I have the actual specifics of this, and I wanted to sort of go through what we have come to learn was the sort of timeline of his warnings and all of the things that were listed on a termination letter that Kohberger himself was given right before they cut the cord with him. So I'm going to just watch some of these so I don't get them wrong. But the highlights, or lowlights, I guess you might call them, was that he had a sexist attitude towards females that he interacted with.
Thank you so much, Olwen. I really appreciate it. I will be putting this toward editing equipment. I'm actually going to be purchasing an external hard drive to help me with my editing. So thank you. I will put that toward that for sure. So I see some questions in the chat that some of you guys are asking. So I'm assuming if it's being asked in the chat, some of you are thinking the same thing. Buddy the dog is not Kaylee's dog. That's Murphy. Okay. Kaylee's and Jack's dog was named Murphy, and Murphy is fine. Buddy was a neighbor of the 112 King Road house, and law enforcement has said, no, there can't be a connection. But we're already hearing behavior issues with Bryan toward women. We're hearing now from 2 students who came forward that said he was hanging out at the Idaho State University. Now, he didn't work there. He didn't go to school there. Why is he hanging out in the student union? Who was he watching? Why was, and their spidey senses were tingling, and it just shows you, pay attention to your spidey senses. That's your fight or flight response, trying to protect you. I love you too, Olwen. Thank you so much. So I hope that answers the dog thing, but let's continue on with this. We have so much to unpack here.
At the school, that he was rude to the women. And then get this, as a teaching assistant, he apparently graded the women differently than he graded the men.
How many of you are not surprised at this at all? That there was this bias by somebody who was we know now how he really felt. There's been a lot of speculation if he was behind the Papa Roger, which would relate him back to the Elliot Roger. issues, which I covered in a video that I posted for you guys a week ago, it does make you wonder what his mindset was. Now, as he was being removed from this job, would he have begun to feel more angry toward the women that were reporting him? Would he have begun to have feel more angry toward whoever he's getting these reprimands from? Would he begin to feel less powerful? And is this what set this chain of motion, this cascade of events that happened at the 112 King Road house on November 13th? Did this set a chain of events into motion where he went in and did away with Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan?
Here is the alleged language that was included in his termination letter, along with the timeline, starting on September 23rd. And by our math, that's about 1 month into his brand new job as a teaching assistant in his doctoral program, which may or may not have been tied to his teaching job. September 23rd, Kohberger apparently has an altercation with one of the professors named Dr. Snyder. Just 10 days later, on October 3rd, the letter outlines that they had met to, quote, discuss the norms of professional behavior.
So this is so great what you're bringing up, Louise. Louise is asking, it depends when he was fired. Yeah, well, and it wasn't just fired, right? It wasn't just fired. It wasn't just fired. He's fired on December the 19th, right? But he knew it was coming. He knew it was coming. So November 13th is when the attack occurred at 1122 King Road. So we have September 23rd. He has an altercation with the professor. On October 3rd, he was meeting to discuss his professional behavior. You can imagine that this would have been a very uncomfortable conversation for somebody like Bryan Kohberger. October 21st, received an email about his failure to, quote, meet expectations. And I would again go back to, this would have made somebody who was desperate to get control, who was desperate to control other people, feel very, very powerless. He was being called out on his misogyny. And when he didn't get his ducks in a row, he immediately had an altercation. Then he had to discuss his professional behavior. Then he received an email about his failure to meet expectations. Then he had to meet on November 2nd to discuss an improvement plan. And you can imagine, for somebody who's a misogynist, that this would have just made him more and more angry, especially that of what he was being called out for, which was grading the women and the men in his class to different standards. So he had a second altercation on December 9th. And then on December the 19th, he was officially terminated. And this may be why his dad went out to get him, to drive him back. But let's continue on, guys, because I think that in looking at the psychology of somebody who does stalking, that is all about control. It's all about trying to control your victims. And I don't think that these two things happened in isolation from each other. I think one was a catalyst that led up to the other. I think he was lurking around at the University of Idaho. I think he was making women, at least two students that have come forward, I'm sure there's more, feel uncomfortable. And now we're finding out that there were women in his class that felt uncomfortable with him. So did this escalate in what happened on November 13th? Let's continue on. Thank you. Deborah says she smashed it. Yeah, and Grunge Truck says, I wouldn't be surprised if he went through school to be better. Yeah, it could be. And Jane says, yeah, all of this would have infuriated him. I agree, Jane. I think that this would have absolutely been, I want to share your comment. I can't share that. But anyway, thank you. Okay. And then Sarah says that improvement plan. Oh man, he was totally enraged. Oh yeah, he would have been so angry. Imagine if you have already a problem with women, that you're grading them differently. So you're already showing, you're already being very passive aggressive. But behind all of this was this anger and this rage. Allegedly, he has not had his day in court yet. And no, of course, this is no excuse. Of course, nobody's saying this is an excuse. What I'm saying is that this was a motive. That's what I think. If he was exactly, yeah, and that's what we don't know yet. But let's continue on together. Yeah. And then Daylight says, I'm changing my opinion. This wasn't insulting. You were right. It's just an opinion. So it's okay to have different opinions. If you guys have a different opinion from me, that's fine. I just ask that we share it, respectfully. And yeah, misogynist and incel. I agree. And then Shadow Dancer says, I wish if he was the perp that he would plead guilty, save the parents from the horror of having it played out. Well, and then this is such a great question, Brittany. Was his professor a female? Well, let's continue on, guys. Let's continue on.
And then 18 days after that, on October the 21st, Dr. Snyder emails Bryan Kohberger to say that he has, quote, failed to meet the expectations that were outlined in the discussions they'd had before. 12 days after that, on November the 2nd, they met again to discuss what they called an improvement plan. And then on December the 7th, that's about, well, let's cut to actually 12 days later, 11 days later, the murders actually happened. So they have the meeting to discuss the improvement plan. And 11 days later, on November 13th, the murders are carried out.
Yeah, and Bryan has two sisters. He has one who's a psychologist, or at least a mental health therapist. And then his other sister was involved. She made a film. But he has two sisters. He has a mother and a father. So, but, we know from seeing these posts when he was going through the visual snow as a teen, he was talking about already that he could not feel things, that he was already like not having normal feelings. So it makes me wonder if there was already a pathology going on behind him. So having all of these things happen, and you can see the November 13th date is right in there in the middle of it. It's right in there. After it would have enraged him, it would have made him feel less powerful. It would have taken away his power. So you can see that it would have been very, very easy for him to escalate. If you haven't already subscribed to Reporter Room, please do. So let's talk a little bit about what that might have looked like. So a peeping Tom, their whole big thing, there's definitely a sense of personal power that they feel over the person that they're peeping on or creeping on. So they can become dangerous. And if a peeping Tom becomes confident in his or her, because women can do this too, to remain undetected, they might be tempted to escalate into physical contact. And we know allegedly that is what happened in this case. So they can creep on you online. And I'm going to share something personal that happened to me, and let me know if you've had anything like this happen to you as well. When this was a few years ago, it was before, I think we really knew how dangerous things were. I was on Facebook. I had everything open. Everything was unlocked, all my photos, everything, until I had a guy that wasn't my personal friend, but he was a good friend of one of my friends. And all of a sudden I noticed he was starting to use my image with his name. And it was really, it creeped me out. It totally creeped me out. I felt like really uncomfortable with it. So I told him not to do that anymore. I just tried handling it directly because he was a friend of a friend. He was somebody that I would see in private chat rooms. So he wasn't completely unknown to me, but he wasn't someone that was in my intimate circle. And he continued. He opened up other accounts using my image, posing as me. By the time it was, and then I started blocking him because I felt so nervous and uncomfortable. By the time I got done, I had blocked 9 different accounts. sock puppet accounts that he had opened to continue this behavior. And at this point, I had, reported him. And this is why and it scared me. It scared me to pieces. I ended up locking down all of my personal photographs and everything on social media after that, because that is a way that somebody can insert themselves into your life. Like I said, I did interact with him a little bit in chat rooms, but that was like really crossing my boundaries. So by the time it was all said and done, I had blocked 9 different accounts, all run by the same guy. He had opened up social media accounts. I had to go try to find them and take them down under using my picture, posing as me. So I think that, some like, and I, got creeper vibes right away and immediately directly asked him to cut it out. He didn't respect the boundaries. He didn't respect the boundaries. And that caused me to take better safety precautions at home also. So for those of you that are at home, think about this. Think about do you keep a spare key outside? If so, you might want to consider bringing that in. You may not want to have a spare key outside, or if you do have it outside, then put it at least in a lockbox. You can get a lock and a key behind it. If you have a spare key with a neighbor, you trust your neighbor or your friend, who has access to their house that, again, may be in your periphery, not in your inner circle. The other thing is making sure that, you have your blinds and windows covered. Lock your door behind you. Lock your doors at night. Check your locks. In fact, I would urge all of you guys that are watching this to go ahead and just do a personal assessment on your own safety. If you use check-in on Facebook, maybe consider cutting that out. Do people need to know that you've checked in at your local restaurant to eat? Maybe not. Maybe you don't want people to know that you're not at home. The other thing I would say is, if you are in a roommate situation, if you yourself are going to college, or maybe you have a child or a grandchild that's going away to college, consider getting them a teddy bear or a nanny cam. This way, and a lock for their door. We know Xana's dad was over there changing the locks. That way, you can know if someone's in your room that isn't supposed to be in the room. Because what I want to know is, with Bryan's cell phone pinging, had he ever previously entered that 1122 King Road house? If you think Bryan had entered the house before, put a 1 in the chat. If you think that night was the first time Bryan ever entered the 1122 King Road house, put a 2 in the chat. And then please do a personal safety assessment on yourself this week. Okay, so let me see. Look and see who can see in your blinds, who can see in your windows, who has access to your neighbor has your key, and trust them, but who do they have access? Who's in their periphery? Because I trusted my friends and still do, but this person wasn't my friend. This person was it was a friend of a friend. It was in the periphery, in a circle of friends, and he had started, and it escalated. I'm seeing a lot of 1s. So you guys think he may have been in the house before. Daylight doesn't know. And Deborah thinks he looks like Dracula. He definitely has a creepy stare. He definitely has a creepy stare. Well, let's continue on, because we have so much stuff to unpack. And then Barbara's saying, I need a Ring doorbell. I get harassment from a gang of 10 teenagers. Well, I would definitely try to get that, and if you can't do that, then consider like a nanny cam or something like that in the meantime. The other thing is, have your security system monitored. Take your cell phone with you. I'm seeing a lot of 1s. A party house, of course. Yeah, and if you are feeling like, if somebody is bothering you, it is crossing those boundaries, report them. So Barbara, what I would say is, go ahead, and the next time they start harassing this gang, because they're getting power, they're getting a payoff from it. They're getting a feeling of power over you. Go ahead and call law enforcement out. See if you can get their pictures. Don't open the door, but maybe through your peephole in your door, if there's a way to get them on camera, and take your power back. And yes, turn your security system on when you leave. Turn it on when you go to bed. But definitely be very, very careful. Olin says, I cannot understand why public were told there was no threat. He definitely would have struck again. I think so too. I think you're right. I think this was maybe his first time. I definitely think he would have struck again. But let's continue on, guys. We have so much to get into. Energy shots. What did I miss? You can back it up. You can back live streams up if you want to catch back up, or you could watch it afterwards.
Then cut forward to 24 days beyond, and that's December 7th. That's when there was another meeting with the professors, and this was supposed to be about the progress of the, quote, improvement plan. Apparently it didn't go too well, because 2 days later, on December 9th, he had another altercation with Dr. Snyder, and here's the quote, in which it became apparent that you had not made progress regarding professionalism. 10 days after that, December 19th, Bryan Kohberger is officially terminated by Washington State University. And some are reporting that he was withdrawn from the data system 3 days later on December the 22nd. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com.
Okay, so I definitely feel like those things would have enraged him. I don't think he would have got done with that and felt like, yeah, I'm good. I feel happy. I think he absolutely would have felt mad.
Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage. I can tell you that we have 3 different sources where we have.
I think Buddy the dog may be related now to Bryan. Now that we're finding out all of this other information, I'd love to go back and look up at the dates of when all of these things were happening, and then look at what happened to Buddy. And I wish I could go into more detail with you on that, but I really cannot. But I do wonder if they're connected. So for those of you who feel like, oh, you know, it must not be that bad. And I've already said, if you're just joining me, that Bryan is innocent until proven guilty. Everybody deserves their day in court, and he has not had his day in court. But I am going to talk about it like it is Bryan, because Bryan's the one that got written up for all this stuff. Bryan's the one who's been indicted. Bryan's the one who's sitting in jail. So, but most SKs begin by stalking and peeping on their victims. Think about Ted Bundy. Think about Dennis Rader, who was the BTK. Think about the Charles Manson family, because Charles Manson, he used to do something that was called a creepy crawly. That's what his followers called it. And they were missions. And the group would go into somebody's house, and they would start off by just rearranging the furniture in the room while people were in their beds asleep. And the idea was, again, to make them feel powerful. They didn't initially start hurting anyone, but we know that this behavior escalated. And that's what I'm assuming happened in the case at 1122 King Road. We know that Xana's dad was changing the locks on her bedroom, and it makes me wonder if she had thought somebody was going into her room. And maybe he was. Maybe, and keeping a ladder outside your house, or a couch, again, I think, walk the perimeter of your house, take a look at, access points, but keeping a ladder outside your house that allows somebody to just climb up to where maybe you have your downstairs locked, but the upstairs, or a couch, that couch could have easily been stepped on, and he's a young guy, he was 28, could have boosted himself up onto the railing. But if you have a key code, change your key code frequently. But it does make me wonder why Xana felt like she needed to have locks put on her door. We know her dad was over there doing that for her. And you can turn the tables on a peeping Tom by reporting them, by reporting when somebody gives you the creepy crawlies. Like immediately when this started on Facebook, I immediately bubbled it up. I asked him one time to stop and he just escalated, and I immediately reported it. And I didn't just report him there. I reported him on every social media platform that I was on, because, and I let my loved ones know too. I'm having a problem with this person. If they try to friend you or whatever, please report him. So the way that, I mean, these people were out in pairs, right? Kaylee and Maddie were out together. They were sleeping in the same room together. They weren't alone. I think that's the other thing that's been like really hard to just process with this whole thing. Xana and Ethan were out together. They were at home in the room together. And then there's been a lot of reports that it was Ethan found in the hall. I don't think that is the case. My understanding from reading through the affidavit is that it was Xana. Xana was in the hall. She had gotten that DoorDash delivery around 4 a.m. and she had answered the door, and she was the one that Bryan encountered in the hall. I think that's what we're going to find out as more information comes to light. But if you know someone who's going away to college or going into a roommate situation, have them put a lock on their bedroom door. See if roommates are honoring it or not with a teddy bear or nanny cam. And if you're putting personal photos, think about locking some of them down. And I'm going to talk about the crazy lady that's been not stalking Bryan, but that has decided that this is the guy for her. This is the man for her. In just a second, but let's continue on with this, because he lost his teaching post. So that would have taken his little bit of passive aggressive power of being able to grade men and women differently was taken away. And then we don't know if whoever had reprimanded him, he would have known he would have been reported by females. So he had to just be seething at this point. I don't know if the professor that gave him the warning was also a female. We don't know. But if it was, this would have just made him seethe even more. And we can see how this set into motion a chain of events.
Have put that information together. We reached out to Washington State University. They won't comment on it. It is incredibly quiet and tight-lipped at Washington State University, not just in the...
And that bothers me, because how many times have... Well, I'm going to let Bryan Enton say it, because Bryan Enton even said he walked all over the Washington State University. He was all over, and nobody said anything about this guy being let go.
The administrative side, but also among the students. And that's why I want to bring in our Bryan Enton, who's our senior national correspondent at NewsNation. All of this is quite surprising. Here we are months after the murders, Bryan, and this information is coming out, and it is very, very hard to get official acknowledgement of this from Washington State University.
It is, Ashley, and this is very interesting what you have uncovered, because I'm thinking back to when I was in the building there where you just saw the video where Bryan Kohberger was teaching, was also a student, a PhD student, criminal justice there at Washington State University. And the first thing I noticed when I was wandering around all of the hallways on multiple floors is on the bulletin boards, they had all of the teacher assistants, the TAs, and the professors listed in many different places, and his name didn't appear anywhere. I initially thought, okay, they went through after the arrest and they got his name off of everything in this building.
It almost makes you wonder, like when some of these crimes do occur on campus and they have the campus, this used to be kind of the standard protocol, is the campus police would handle it and they wouldn't escalate up when SA happened or something happened on the campus. They would hide it. And it almost makes you wonder if that is what happened here, where they just didn't want to have it be known that, have their name, their college name, their university name tied to what happened at 1122 King Road, tied to Bryan Kohberger. So yeah, Bryan's thought that's why that his name wasn't appearing. But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to
But
it.
now I'm wondering, with this new information you're reporting, did they take his name down much earlier because he was in fact fired?
Well, it's pretty fascinating because if you think about the dates, December 22nd, if he's withdrawn from the data system in that university, he still hasn't been arrested until December 30th, that Friday night. And we are also told that it was official. His official termination actually happened at the very end of that month. He
wants to know, why did it take so long to call 911? And I touched on this, that 8-hour time gap. I wish I had an answer for you. I really do. I wish I had an answer for you. Hi, Janie. I wish I had an answer for you as to, as to what the 8-hour delay was, because now we have learned that she allegedly, I have not heard this from law enforcement, but we're hearing that apparently roommate Dylan, after she heard everything in the house, she opened the door 3 times. She didn't see anybody the first 2 times. The third time, she saw a man with bushy eyebrows with his face covered. Everybody was asking, why didn't she call 911? Why didn't she call 911 now? And she said she was in frozen shock phase. And I had Nurse Allison come on and explain to you that would have lasted around 30 minutes on average, not 8 hours, not 8 hours. So what took 8 hours? And now we're learning that she was allegedly texting the roommates and that they weren't answering her. And she still didn't call 911. Now, I don't know if she was just so afraid that, she just didn't know what to do. She is really young, you guys. She's still a teenager. She is just 19 years old. And maybe, she came from a very sheltered background. She didn't ever think, and nobody would ever think that something like this could happen. I mean, especially at that university, because nothing like this had happened in over 7 years. So, I can understand that why she didn't jump to that. But when she was texting people, and she allegedly did, why at that point didn't she call for police? And that's where I would say that, for everybody, have that conversation. If you yourself are going away to school, or you have a child or grandchild that's going away to school, have that conversation about, listen, if something is creeping you out, report it. If someone is creeping you out, report it. If you feel like someone is in, lock your door to your room. If you have roommates, put a nanny cam in there. Let's make sure nobody's coming in your room that you don't know about. And then they may just come in to borrow a shirt or something like that. It could be completely innocent, but it could be more than that. And 8 hours, yes, Janie, I agree. 8 hours is such a long time. Such a long time. Now, Brett says this helps Bryan more than it hurts him. I think maybe the university had side information on him. I don't think they would set somebody up for something like this just to get rid of somebody. They were already in the process of getting him out. They were going through the steps to get rid of Bryan Kohberger. They started off by setting out some parameters of him either cleaning up his act or he would be removed. Instead, he continued. He didn't stop. He escalated. So they ultimately did remove him. But, going back to Dylan for a second, it's just so bizarre. Could have been teaching in class and just snapped. Yeah, that's right. And Olwen saying she wasn't that sheltered living in a party house. Well, I mean, she was just 19 and she was the youngest one in there. And from what I understand, she was also one of the newest roommates in there. So for her, maybe she was living in a very sheltered, maybe she was living with her parents prior to that. And this was her first thing. So I just want to be careful because of her age. Yeah, stranger danger. Exactly. except in this case, it can be someone you know. It can be someone that just is a friend of a friend. It can be someone that's just a friend of a friend. Well, let's continue on, guys. Let's listen to Bryan, because, yeah, he was all over at the beginning of this case and noticed that Bryan Kohberger's name had been taken down. But was it taken down because of what happened at 1122 King Road, or was it taken down prior to this? Let's continue on together, guys.
Told you're finished, you're not going to be a TA in the spring session. I'm not sure about the winter session, but it, the word has it that it was the 30th, that it was completely over, and that just, that ends up being the same day that he was arrested. What I'm curious about is why the students are so quiet about this. I understand the staff. They work for WSU. They have to toe the line if WSU doesn't want them speaking, but students don't work for the school. They can talk if they want to, and yet they haven't.
They've talked a little bit, Ashley. They don't want to go on camera when we've been on campus in the past, but they have spoken a little from what we've gathered. He was a TA of both Criminal Justice 101 and criminal law. We heard from several students along the way that he gave off weird vibes, that they got a creepy feeling from him. We also heard something that matched up with your new reporting tonight, that he was a hard grader. That at one point, actually, there was such an issue with the way that he was grading papers that a higher level professor had to come in and get involved at one point.
So a higher level professor came in, got involved. He would have known that it was most likely not the males in the class complaining, although I've seen a lot of good guys stand up for their female classmates. I've seen that lots of times where we have really good guys who go in there. But he would have probably, with his mindset, if he really is a sycophant of Elliot Rodger, if he really is a misogynist, and it sounds like he, just from the grading papers incident, that there was some misogyny going on, this would have made him feel powerless. He would have felt emasculated, potentially, allegedly. He would have felt his power over these women being diminished and taken away. And he might have known he was on his way out. So what do you guys think? Do you think, if you think this was a catalyst that may have set a chain of motions, a chain of events into motion, if you think that this would have been a catalyst for Bryan Kohberger to go out and do something like this, put a 1 in the chat. If you think that it was unrelated, put a 2 in the chat. Let's continue on, guys. We have so much to unpack here.
Bryan, I remember when that original reporting broke, but I never remember anyone delineating between the grading being tougher on the women than on the men, just that he was very hard on the students. But not only are we hearing that he was grading women differently, but also that he was rude to women and that he, quote, had a sexist attitude towards women among his multiple behavioral problems.
Yeah, that is new. I haven't heard it to that extent. We did hear a little bit about possibly some sexism. We also heard, if you don't remember, Ashley, about there was an issue. He maybe had an issue with like a pride flag on a door in one of the school buildings there. But in terms of it going to the level with your new reporting tonight, to the point where he was actually fired, and there were so many issues that he was actually fired as a TA, that's brand new.
So, Bryan, I'm just looking over this timeline again, and it's pretty astounding because he only started as a TA at the end of August. But the problem started right away on September 23rd. Look at this timeline. There are just mere, sometimes, days and short weeks in between each issue. But the very first thing started within a month, a fight with his professor. And then letters saying, you've got to be, up on your professional behavior. You're not meeting the expectations. We need an improvement plan. We got to meet about the improvement plan. And another fight, like 2 fights with the professor, all in the course of a couple of months, all the while hearing, like, not in this timeline, but hearing these reports of being sexist and rude to women and being troublesome in the grading. like 2 fights.
So I've seen people say this will be the professor's legacy. I mean, nobody who's ever had to get involved in a situation like this at work, if it's been racism or misogyny or something like this, or any type of group, any kind of prejudice, if you're doing a job situation, you just have to deal with it in a very methodical manner. But most people don't escalate to what happened here. Allegedly, everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But if you look at the timeline, you could just see the altercation with the professor, meeting to discuss professional behavior, received an email about failure to meet expectations, and then November 2nd, meeting to discuss an improvement plan. He would have known that these young women would have been reporting him, right? He would have known that this was not, or even if it was guys too also reporting him, he still would have blamed the women. He would have blamed the young women in the class. And I do think there's a lot of good guys out there that do stand up for women all the time. And I see people are really upset about the fact that Dylan did not call 911. And I am not here to be an apologist for Dylan. I don't know why she didn't call 911. She has not had her chance to speak out yet because she's a witness. She's under a gag order. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to urge caution with her just until we do hear the whole story of what happened, because we didn't know about the text messages that allegedly went out to the roommates to see if they were okay. I don't know why she didn't call. If she sent the text messages out, I don't know. But, it does make you wonder if they had been called sooner, was anybody okay for a little while after? And you can see, the family members getting so upset. And, Kathy saying Ethan's sister-in-law is questioning Dylan's actions. I believe that post was from a few months ago. I knew it's come to light this week, but I think that she was posting that a while ago. And the family, they are under a gag order, my understanding is, and they may be they may know more than what we know. But let's continue on, guys, because this is just egregious. And I do think that when you look at what a stalker's mentality is, what his mentality would have been, and the feeling of the need to have power and control, that's what being a peeping Tom or peeping, I don't know what the word is for a woman, but it's not harmless. It's a way to feel control or power over the people that you're peeping on. So anyway, let's continue on together, guys.
With the professor, all in the course of a couple of months, all the while hearing, like, not in this timeline, but hearing these reports of being sexist and rude to women and being troublesome in the grading department. So what's curious is if Kohberger's program was tied to his teaching job. And not only that, he had an on-campus office and he had an on-campus apartment. And it's possible that those things were tied to his teaching job as well. So is it possible, Bryan, that his whole life was about to collapse because he was being, he was fired, but he knew that was coming, or at least he should have known it might have been coming. And he might have lost his program and his accommodations on campus.
Yeah, so this would have been tied to his ability to have housing, right? This would have been tied to the PhD program potentially. This would have gone on his academic record that he had an issue. This would have really enraged him. So beyond just being called out for grading women differently than grading the men, and it must have been really blatant for them to have caught it, right?
It's a very big possibility. Let's go back and think to the fact that his dad came out to drive with him back to Pennsylvania. A lot of people questioned that. Why would the dad fly all the way over there to drive the car all the way back just for a Christmas break? Why wouldn't he just fly back? Would it even maybe be cheaper?
This does explain a couple of things. It explains why the dad flew out there, because Bryan would have been upset. And his dad may have picked up on some stuff and some phone conversations. We don't know. And his dad may have been trying to, calm him down and be like, I'll come out, I'll drive back with you. It would have explained, the drive back in the car. It also explains, and this actually helps Bryan. I made a lot, and also a lot of other content creators, about the fact that he did change his tags, not in Washington where he was supposedly residing, but he changed his tags to his parents' home in Pennsylvania. Now, maybe he changed his tags there because he couldn't go back. Maybe he couldn't go back. What do you guys think? So that kind of helps him out a little bit, but not as much. And it just does make, we know that his phone had pinged near the 1122 King Road house leading up to the November 13th. We know that it pinged at 9 a.m. that morning. So he was definitely enthralled. He wanted to go back, and he was either looking for the knife sheath, or he wanted to go back to enjoy the circus and the mayhem that he created, the chaos that he created. And then, and I brought this up in the video that I put out just a couple of days ago, at 5:30 p.m. on November 13th, his phone gets shut off again, and it doesn't come back on till 8:30 p.m. And where? It's near a national park in Johnson. Did he go dispose of some things in that park? And he's saying he changed his tags to Washington, not Pennsylvania. Oh, thanks for that, because I did think it was Pennsylvania. I have the Carfax. I just don't have it up in front of me. All right, guys, let's continue on.
Was there more going on behind the scenes now that we know all of this?
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find news.
So what do you think? Do you guys think there was more going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about? Is there something else happening? Hold on one second. Let me grab this. Was there something else going on behind the scenes?
It'll look a lot like an end. I mean, justice doesn't have a room where you can read books and you can go to school and you can have 3 meals and you can have your vegan diet. To me, that's not justice. Justice is when you leave the planet and the whole world is able to rejoice and be glad that you are not there. That's justice.
Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies starts now.
We're also going to discuss the bizarre route that Bryan and his dad made on the way from Pullman, Washington to Albright, Pennsylvania. Okay, so let's talk about this route for a second, because if you look at the top line, you can see that's the route that would have been the quickest way to get from Pullman, Washington to Albright, Pennsylvania. But instead, they took this 6 to 7 hour detour. Now, I understand there was some weather coming in, there was a storm, and it could have been related to that. But we don't know what day they left yet. We don't know what day they came back. But also, would you need to take a 6 to 7 hour detour to avoid some weather? It's really weird, right? I agree. I think his phone activity tells us so much. Energy shots. I wish, and yeah, I would love to go through the park. But this is a really bizarre route, and it makes me wonder if he was disposing of things along the way. They made a 6 to 7 hour detour. Why? We know, according to the affidavit, that Bryan returned to 1122 King Road around 9 a.m. on the morning of December 13th. There's been a lot of speculation about whether he returned back to the crime scene to look for the knife sheath, or if he returned in hopes of seeing law enforcement descending on the home. Kaylee's sister Olivia felt Bryan went back to admire the, quote, circus he created. But let's talk about where Bryan's cell phone pings, because it shows where Bryan went later on in the day. And I'm going to talk about that detour that Bryan and his dad made on their road trip in just a moment, so please stay with me. Did Bryan go to a national park to dispose of the knife? Bryan went to 1122 King Road around 9 a.m. We know this. He returned from Idaho back to Pullman, Washington. It looks like he got some coffee, went to Albertsons. However, in the same affidavit, Bryan's phone pings again in Idaho. So what's going on? Because then his phone shuts off again. And this was for around 3 hours. Why? Was Bryan going back to the crime scene to see if law enforcement had been called and to enjoy the mayhem he created allegedly? Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Or was there something else going on? Because this time Bryan's phone doesn't ping in Moscow. His phone pings in Johnson, Idaho at 5:36 p.m. Then his phone is switched off or put into airplane mode, and it doesn't come back on for nearly 3 hours. It turns back on around 8:30 p.m., still on December 13th. And credit to Annie Elise for discovering this. So what was going on? Idaho is next to the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest. Is this where Bryan disposed of the knife and possibly his clothing? So let's talk about Bryan and Michael Kohberger and their rerouted trip from Pullman, Washington back to Bryan's parents' home in Albright, Pennsylvania. Why tack on an additional 6 to 7 hours on an already long drive? And I'm going to discuss two important theories on this drive with you in just a moment, so please stay with me. So why would you tack on that amount of time onto a drive that was already pretty long? I could see wanting to avoid the weather, but have you ever driven 7 to 8 hours out of your way to avoid the weather? And the other thing that's really odd is Michael Kohberger, who's Bryan's dad, gave two different reasons as to why they made this detour. And in one conversation, he said he had no idea why. He didn't know why they made this detour. In another conversation, he said that it was to avoid the weather. Now, law enforcement has said that first it was reported that they had lost Bryan for some period of time and that they found him. Now they're saying that didn't happen. I don't know. I think if it did happen, they certainly wouldn't want it out there that they had lost him for some period of time. But it does make me wonder if he thought he was being watched. And maybe that could have also been another motive. He would have needed to get rid of some stuff. He may or may not have been coming back to that apartment in Pullman, Washington. We know he left his computer tower there, so he was planning at some point to come back. But, we don't know what kind of jeopardy he was in with that job, if his PhD candidacy would have been in jeopardy also. But let's continue on, guys. Law enforcement did not have enough evidence to secure an arrest warrant by the time Bryan and his dad both left Pullman, Washington for the holidays. The FBI made plans to surveil both of them until they gathered enough evidence. The exact date Bryan and his father left Pullman has not been disclosed by authorities, so I'm only able to give you estimated dates. However, law enforcement who were surveilling Bryan allegedly lost Bryan and his dad for several hours during this cross-country trip. Now, the FBI is denying that this ever occurred, so I will leave it to you to decide what you think really happened here. Either way, we know that Bryan and his dad chose to take an indirect route home, one that Michael would later make two different claims about. What do you guys think? Let me know. So what do you think? Do you think this was just related to the weather? Because that's a really long detour. That is a really long detour for just some weather. I can see driving a little bit out of your way, but 6 to 7 hours is a big, big detour. And do you think he was disposing of evidence along the way? Do you think he thought maybe he was under surveillance? And then we had those two traffic stops. Again, he had to have had alarm bells going off in his head that why he was getting pulled over on those two traffic stops. And we know now that law enforcement wanted body cam footage of his hands while they were waiting to gather enough evidence to arrest him. Indirect route home. One that his 67-year-old dad, Michael, would later tell a friend this seemed to make little sense. Now, according to a mechanic, Bryan's dad told him that they did it due to the weather conditions. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy here, because was this rerouting due to weather, or did Bryan's dad really not understand why they rerouted this trip, adding 6 to 7 hours to it? So let's take a look at the most direct route from Pullman to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. It does make me wonder if Bryan suspected that he was being watched by authorities and tried to throw law enforcement off the trail by taking another route. Another theory is that this route was to dispose of additional evidence. What do you think? So this detour added around 6 to 7 hours to their drive time. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And to be clear, Bryan's dad flew from his home with his wife in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, all the way to Pullman, Washington. And now, in light of what the story that Ashley Banfield and Brian Inton broke, the fact that he was getting reprimanded, that he was being removed from his teacher's assistant job at the university in Washington, at Washington State University, it does now at least give me a better understanding as to why his father, because I always thought that was strange, would be flying out there. The problem with admitting that he had been let go was it also gives a motive to the prosecution for what would have escalated this to happen. That it also gives a pattern of behavior with misogyny by grading the young women differently than grading the young men. What do you guys think? In order to be with Bryan for this lengthy car ride home for the holidays. Now, was this their normal? Did he always drive home with Bryan, or was this something unusual? Because I don't understand why a 28-year-old would need to be accompanied. Now, Bryan's dad is not a suspect in any of this, and even Bryan is innocent until proven guilty, and he has not had his day in court. But a lot of people are wondering, why did they take this route? Now, Bryan was arrested on December 30th at his parents' home. He was extradited to Moscow, Idaho on murder charges, and we know they made this trip sometime between December 12th and December 16th. Now, the most likely reason, in my opinion, would have been to avoid heavy snow and potential. So now I think we have a better understanding of why Bryan's dad was out there. Now, of course, Bryan's probably was hoping, he had to know they were going to find out he had been reprimanded in his teacher's assistant job for grading young women differently than grading young men. He had to know that there was going to be a proven pattern of misogyny. And this is so bizarre because he has two sisters and he has a mother. So I don't understand how he got here. But it could have been the weather, although again, it just doesn't account for 6 to 7 hours. But the car, it was getting to be a little bit older, so it could have just been a weather detour. But it's odd that his dad didn't know how to answer the question either, because he told a mechanic one thing and he told a neighbor a different thing. So I don't know. I just thought that was weird. Why wouldn't your answer be the same? It was the weather, because he told the neighbor he didn't know. Now, maybe he didn't understand the neighbor's question. Maybe it was just a simple misunderstanding. I don't know, you guys. Potential blizzard conditions. And I guess it just depends on which day they actually left. And court documents don't tell us what day the Kohbergers left Bryan's apartment in Pullman, Washington. Were Bryan and his father simply worried about the snow? Their car that they were driving, Bryan's car, was a 2015 Hyundai. So I don't know. The car is not even 10 years old. And I'm going to talk about BTK in just a moment, so please stay with me. To me, it just seems like they could have easily driven this car home. Dennis Rader. So I want to talk about this bizarre woman on Facebook who's apparently decided that this guy, of all the guys she could have, this is the one she's picked. It's like going through a car lot of brand new cars and you're picking the one that's been in an auto accident. Now, Bryan is innocent till proven guilty, but I don't know. This would like be a big red flag for me. But if you don't know, her name is Brittany. I'll just say H is her last name. I don't want to give her last name, but she has a teenage son, an underage son. I'm so sorry. And she writes about Bryan. She wrote about him nearly every single day. Sometimes she's made multiple posts about him every single day since early January. Again, you're in a car lot, you're shopping for cars. Okay, maybe a used car with a good Carfax, but why are you picking the wrecked car, the car that's been wrecked, totaled, sitting on the lot? I don't understand this mentality. Can you guys make sense of her mentality? That's probably the next mentality I'm going to dig into, is what kind of women go for these guys, because they do. We know with the Menendez brothers, they got married. I mean, even Ted Bundy got married after he had been convicted. This woman married him and had a child with him. But so anyway, this Brittany said, that, quote, "I know that the last I heard weeks ago is that Bryan is being kept isolated from other inmates. And so I know that we do both likely sleep alone, as I mentioned in past posts." She dated this shortly after midnight. And she put, "I mentioned something about getting certain confirmations from him about his feelings and about him being my divine masculine." This is who she picked. "I don't mean that I reach out to him to receive anything back at all from him, since I do that from a place of caring about him, sharing my feelings, and knowing what a serious situation he's in." I don't know, guys. I would love to know, like, what the psychology, and maybe I'll do a deep dive into that. What is the psychology of somebody who goes for one of these guys? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Why would you pick the wrecked car? And again, Bryan's innocent until proven guilty, but you know, Ted Bundy, again, why pick the wrecked car? I don't understand. Jane thinks it's wanting to fix these guys. It could be. And then Olwen says that he thinks that the whole world was fascinated. Why, I do not know. I would love to know. I would love to know. That might be like something that we dig into. If you guys have a comment about that, please leave it for me in the comment section below. And on that note, I am going to just say thank you. Please give this video a thumbs up. And I just want to thank our executive producers, Energy Shots and Sasha Angel, our producers, Jan Brooks, Spirit Walker, Jane J, and American Alpha, Rare the Patriot. I want to thank you guys for all of your super thanks and super stickers last week. And I want to thank our awesome channel members. And thank you also to our mods for taking your time this evening. I'm grateful for everyone. And thank you to all of our subscribers. I really am grateful for each and every one of you. If you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, please do. There'll be a new video out tomorrow. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.